Welcome back, traveller. Tonight we slipped behind velvet ropes to sniff the truth. The spotless crown was stitched, starched, and sometimes crawling. You've heard the polished myth, gleaming marble, rosewater mornings, virtue that smelled like lilies. Here's the twist. Clean at court was a performance. Perfumed gloves masked yesterday's stew. Pomanders battled drafty corridors. Wigs waged itchy wars, and linen, changed not washed, did most of the heavy lifting. We'll test the legend against the ledger, expose royal hygiene myths without mercy, and show how image versus reality was engineered by laundry, vinegar, and timing. The payoff: you'll walk away with a storyteller's toolkit for spotting pageantry in your own life, plus a few oddly useful tricks. Lemon, anyone? Before we uncork the past, hit like and subscribe so you don't miss the next deep dive. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? Let's map our own little court across the globe. You wake inside a palace where marble gleams and portraits pretend the air smells like roses. From a distance, it looks spotless. Up close, you catch candle wax, starch, damp wool, and the faint animal note of leather boots drying by the hearth. That's your first lesson in image versus reality. The crown sold perfection. The building sold prestige. But the people selling you the story were working noses, not halos. Hold that thought. Royal hygiene myths thrive exactly where the floor is buffed, just enough to make you stop asking questions. Now let's shadow the chamber staff at daybreak. Before the first bow, there's a flurry, ash swept, windows cracked open 2 fingers, linens checked for last night's battles against sweat and perfume. A valet lays out a clean shift and a basin. And yes, court cleanliness often meant clean by change, not clean by bath. Water was heavy to haul, slow to heat, and politically risky to splash around a sovereign in winter. So the second lesson in palace routine reality: cleanliness is a negotiation between logistics and theatre, not just a moral virtue. The sovereign doesn't wash so much as get curated. Hands, face, and pulse, points meet warmed cloths. Aromatic vinegars kiss temples. Fingers dip in rosewater. That's more contract than soap. That's ceremonial grooming, the staged version of care that plays well in front of witnesses. Meanwhile, a discreet louse comb waits under a folded towel, like a bodyguard with opinions. If it shows up, it never happened. You see how behind the throne, reputation is a room you clean. Twice, once with water, once with narrative. Linen is the real hero, and you, savvy traveller, should respect it. A fresh shirt, chemise or shift, can drink a surprising amount of sweat, then leave the body feeling reset. Starch keeps ruffs crisp and odors pointed outward. Herbs stitched into seams advertise. Virtue the way cologne does on modern elevators. That's aristocratic upkeep in action. Buy more fabric, launder relentlessly, and pass for immaculate even when the plumbing votes against you. If you're counting keywords, yes, this is where court cleanliness actually earns its paycheck. Hair is its own battlefield. Wigs, pomades, and powders can smell like pastries and turn into buffets for things that aren't invited to banquets. Enter the barber surgeon with spirits of wine, scented oils, and the quiet confidence of a man who knows which royal ear needs gentle dewaxing before council. Third lesson in image versus reality. The further you climb socially, the more hands you need to look effortless. Ceremonial grooming wasn't vanity, it was policy. Appear vigorous, appear composed, or markets and ministers get nervous. Teeth? Picture powders of salt and clove, twigs for polishing and breath rinses that burn like honest advice. In a world before fluoride, aristocratic upkeep meant masking problems faster than curing them. Chew a fennel seed, sip a mint infusion, keep the silver cup handy. A sovereign with halitosis still ruled, but a sovereign who smelled like order ruled easier. Again, royal hygiene myths blur here. Portraits never painted toothaches, yet diaries frequently did. Let's talk rooms. Palaces had privies, certainly, but not the number your nose would vote for. Rushes were strewn, then scented, then regretted a week later. The staff's quiet war against smell. Vinegar mopping, brazier fumigation, herb bundles tucked behind screens was permanent. That's palace routine reality. Not perfection, but tireless mitigation. When visitors reported sweet air, they were really admiring a logistics victory, not a miracle. Court cleanliness was less a state than a schedule. Now, the big misconception: royals never bathed. Partial truth, widely exported. Many did bathe, sometimes often, sometimes in private copper tubs that steamed like arguments. Others preferred sponging and linen rotations during plague seasons or frigid months. Medical fashion mattered. Some physicians warned against porous skin, inviting bad airs, while others prescribed hot baths, followed by swift chilling rubdowns. Behind the throne, choices followed doctors, weather, and politics. That's why royal hygiene myths are tasty. They collapse nuance into a click. Perfume. Please don't underestimate its strategy. Scent mapped rank, mood, and occasion. Lighter notes for morning audiences, resins for evening chapel, citrus-toned waters when ambassadors needed to think crisp. This was ceremonial, grooming, as language. And yes, perfume sometimes concealed rot, in drains, in mouths, in compromises, but it more often framed a scene so minds behaved. If you've ever lit a candle before guests arrived, congratulations, you've practiced aristocratic upkeep on a modern budget. Follow the laundry, and you'll meet the empire behind the embroidery. Cauldrons lie full as earth, beating posts, bleaching lawns. Whole micro-industries existed to keep royalty clean. Laundresses had forearms like arguments, and a taxonomy of stains that would humble a chemist. The result fed royal hygiene myths, because spotless linen photographs well in memory and poorly in workload. Palace routine reality lived in those steamy rooms, where the monarchy's reputation boiled, wrung, and dried before breakfast. Now, peek at the choreography of witnesses. Much of washing happened in semi-public, during levees or morning communion with the body politic. You saw the sovereign dabbed, scented, laced, and you learned that image versus reality wasn't deceit. It was governance. People trust what they repeatedly see, especially when towels are monogrammed. Court cleanliness reassured investors, nobles, and rumour mills that the centre held. And on days when the centre didn't, the ritual kept hands steady until policy caught up. Place your ear to the door and listen for the joke. The staff tells each other, clean is when the important noses agree. It's funny because it's true. Royal hygiene myths weren't invented out of malice. They were polished out of necessity. If a king smelled like confidence and a queen like rosewater justice, the behind the throne machine had done its job. What happens when the scent loses the argument and the lice win a round? That's our next step. The cracks in the porcelain, wigs that bite back, wardrobes that ferment, and how palaces learned to fight decay without admitting they were at war. You start at the mirror where court beauty is supposed to be effortless, and immediately meet its mortal enemy, the itch. Powder drifts like frosting. Pomatum gleams like butter. The wig sits proud as a cavalry officer, and beneath it all, a scalp negotiating with tiny insurgents. You can smell orange blossom and spirits of wine, then a back note of warm skin that perfume can frame but never erase. Here's where image versus reality stops being a slogan and becomes a sensation you can't ignore. Elegance is always 5 minutes away from a scratch. The routine to keep wigs alive could pass for a workshop manual. You watch the barber heat combs, melt pomade, and work in scented vinegar to persuade yesterday's powder to retire gracefully. Blouse combs appear without fanfare, used with the discreet confidence of someone who knows the difference between inconvenience and scandal. Strands are tied back into place with thread fine as gossip. This is maintenance behind the throne, not glamorous, absolutely essential, and performed at a tempo that keeps the sovereign's patience from shedding. Powder is more engineering than fashion. Rice and wheat starch carry perfume stiff in shape, and, on bad days, turn sweat into paste. Too much powder cracks like old plaster. Too little and the wig sulks into curls that red as tired policy. On winter nights, a careless spark can make a powdered coiffure think about pyrotechnics. Dermatologists don't exist yet, but rashes do, and you learn the real cost of grandeur on tender skin. Again, ceremonial grooming works best when nobody notices how carefully it was measured. Down the corridor, laundry fights a parallel war. Cauldrons boil. Lye bites. Fuller's earth drinks grease. Linens are beaten, rinsed, and laid on bleaching lawns that look like rows of surrendered flags. Shrinkages a villain, starch a fickle ally, and colour a weather report. Too grey means not enough sun. Too crisp means someone overdosed the bucket. Clean here is a craft. Purity is a supply chain. And you finally see the gears that turn a spotless collar into a public promise. Perfume lives in the liminal spaces where rooms change temperature and nerves change their minds. A wrist gets a citrus whisper for counsel. A neck takes resin for chapel. A handkerchief carries lavender to help through a tedious treaty. Scent isn't just camouflage, it's choreography for moods. Used well, it keeps conversations cooler and tempers kinder. Used badly, it declares a duel with the noses in the room. This is the gentler face of aristocratic upkeep. Not vanity, but social engineering through aroma. Then there's the bed. That embroidered theatre of truce and ambush. Mattresses are warmed with pans, then inspected like enemy lines for bedbugs that laugh at titles. Curtains are aired. Straw is replaced before it sours. Fumigation smokes out what powders entice. In winter, some households freeze linens outdoors to stun vermin. In summer, sun and beating sticks do the stern talking. When people praise court cleanliness, they're unknowingly applauding a night shift that refused to be squeamish. Banquets leave their own fingerprints. Gloves are sometimes perfumed to keep meat's bravado from lingering on royal hands. Bowls of wine vinegar sit discreetly to cut grease between courses. Toothpicks and clove pastes wage a quiet campaign against the memory of garlic. Teeth ache behind smiles that paintings immortalize as serenity. If dinner smells like triumph and the corridor like time, the staff has won another round in a war no chronicle lists. Medical fashion blows hot and cold on bathing. Some physicians swear warm water invites sickness through softened pores. Others prescribe steam, cold rub-downs, and brisk walks to chase stubborn humours. You watch a sovereign compromise. Sponge baths, quick dips, a strict rule about draft-free drying, and a robe that arrives like a hug with good timing. That's palace routine reality. Less dogma, more calibration, always aiming for good enough to govern, rather than perfect enough to faint. Servants become invisible, authors of the royal body. A maid could write a small book about chamber pots, ash and vinegar that saved a morning audience from smelling like last night's truth. A footman knows which corridor traps odors and which window can be opened exactly 2 fingers without making tapestries complain. The miracle isn't that palaces were fragrant, it's that they were survivable and often pleasant, while hundreds of warm humans kept breathing inside stone. Scandal management has its own toolkits. If a lady in waiting discovers unwelcome tenants in a headpiece, that crisis becomes a scheduling question. Which afternoon to retire, which fabric to send to the boil, which harpist to place outside the antechamber, to keep mood from turning into gossip. No proclamations, no hysteria, just a sequence of small mercies that keeps dignity intact. You realize reputation isn't a wall. It's a tent, constantly restate. The paradox of smell and status might surprise you. Wait, what? Don't Pioligilius, City laundresses often had the cleanest hands by noon, and the freshest air by night, while a duke's wardrobe, heavy, scented, seldom truly aired, could ferment like a defeated army. Money buys fabric, yes, but wisdom buys airflow and time. That's where royal hygiene myths deserve edits. Luxury didn't guarantee freshness. Discipline did. And discipline was a servant's superpower more than a prince's hobby. So when you watch the final touch, powder settled, linen sharp, gloves a quiet orchard, you're not seeing magic, you're seeing a scoreboard. Today, elegance outmaneuvered biology. Tomorrow, the itch will try again. And to understand why water could be both friend and foe, we need to open the doors to the bath chamber and the heating rooms, where copper, steam vinegar, and paranoia attempt a fragile truce. Shall we step into the tub without slipping on the illusions? Start with the weight of water. You picture a soothing soak, but the tub doesn't fill itself. Dozens of buckets cross courtyards like ants carrying a cathedral. Firewood is accounted for like silver boilers cough into life, and a small army times the relay so the temperature lands on merciful rather than lawsuit. You smell smoke, hot metal, damp linen, the ghost of rosemary hanging from a hook. This is where image versus reality slaps your wrist. A single bath is a logistical performance with blisters, not a spontaneous moment in a painting. The room tells you how the court thinks. Marble floors? Gorgeous, treacherous. Screens for modesty. Also, windbreaks so hot, skin doesn't meet a draft and start a medical rumour. Attendants test the copper with fingertips, the way bakers test bread. Then pour in herbal infusions. Thyme for stubborn aches, lemon peel for a mind that want land. Bay leaves because someone's grandmother swore by them. You hear the tiniest slosh against the tub's lip, like a heartbeat counting down to calm. Doctors hover in the script even when they aren't present. In one era, warm water is medicine. In another, it's gossip that invites illness through open pores. So the sovereign compromises. Brief immersion, brisk rub down, robe wrapping like armor. Vinegar rinses are the favorite middle path, sharp enough to feel cleansing without advertising recklessness. That's palace routine reality in a nutshell. Not purity or filth, but calibration, always tailored to weather, season, and politics. Soap is not the soap, you know. Sometimes it's lye and fat that bites back. Sometimes it's an oiled cloth that persuades rather than scours. Olive oil cakes arrive wrapped in gauze from coastal merchants. They're sent a neat paragraph about trade routes. Erosive powders, pumice, crushed shells, even stale bread get used on elbows that keep secrets. The goal is glow without redness, freshness without story. Call it ceremonial grooming for skin. When you emerge, people should notice your decisions, not your pause. Privacy is an instrument, not a given. On ordinary days, the bath is quiet. A steward, two trusted attendants, a guard at the door humming the corridor's temperature. On high symbol days, the bathing hour becomes semi-public theatre during the morning levee. Hands and face, scented cloths at the pulse, proof of vigour in front of important eyes. That small ritual sells stability better than 1,000 decrees. Behind the throne, bodies are part of the messaging budget. Sound design matters. Copper sings. When water hits hot metal, steam softens the room's edges. The faint clink of glass files sets a tempo that slows the breath. A harp in the next chamber keeps conversations from echoing into politics. Towels arrive warm and obedient. A stool appears exactly where your foot expects it. A comb is placed so your hand finds it without looking. Clean isn't just chemistry, It's choreography that spares you from thinking at the 1 hour you shouldn't have to. The disaster file is real. A tub can tip, a coal can pop, a tapestry can drink a splash and ferment a grievance. That's why floors are scrubbed with vinegar the second the water's gone. Why braziers are capped in a sequence no one dares freestyle. Why the door stays latched until the room smells like eucalyptus instead of almost news. If you've ever cleaned up before anyone noticed, you already speak this dialect of court cleanliness, preventive apology written in steam. Attendants are masters of timed kindness. Or one checks the pulse under your thumb and adjusts the water without making it a conversation. Another counts heartbeats during the cold rinse, so you don't clutch at air. A third tracks how long you've been sitting. Too little, you feel cheated. Too much, the council inherits a wilted sovereign. This is soft power, keeping hard power upright. The best help doesn't leave fingerprints, only better outcomes. Economics lurk in the tub like a second temperature. Firewood has to be cut, hauled, and justified. Water has to be lifted or piped, then accounted for by people who will be asked why flour is dear if baths are cheap. A restorative soak means cooks are boiling less in the kitchen at that hour, laundresses are negotiating queue order, and guards along the corridor are swapping routes so the hallway stays calm. Luxury isn't free. It's paid in coordinated minutes. Scent is the signature. A citrus note writes, alert at the temples. A resin underlines, gravitas at the throat. A poppy whisper around the shoulders warns the body not to sprint into the day. The idea isn't to mask. It's to frame. If the audience smells order, they behave. If they catch panic, they amplify it. That's the quiet calculus of aristocratic upkeep, steering human weather with ounces, not edicts. The exit ritual is the real spell. Water is swept toward brass grates, attendants wring towels until they sigh, and skin is sealed with oil, so drafts bounce off like rumours. The robe lands with the accuracy of habit. The signet ring returns to its finger like a reminder. The door opens a hand's width, and the world tries not to rush you. A bath done right doesn't just clean. It edits the next 3 hours into something survivable. And yet the tub can't fix what the corridor undoes. If drainage sulks, if chamber pots wander, if kitchens and privies share a vent, the palace will smell like a fairy tale that forgot its editor. To understand why clean depends as much on exits as on entrances, we have to follow the water after it leaves the room. Pipes, pits, night soil roots, and the politics of where stink is allowed to live. Ready to step through the door the portraits never show. You follow the water past the copper tub and discover that clean has a second act most paintings never show. Behind a panel painted with lilies sits a chute, a shaft, or a clever bench, with a hole that pretends not to be an argument with gravity. Warm air rises, cool air falls, and odors negotiate like diplomats with poor sleep. Below cesspits breathe under courtyards and moats, mutter about duties they never asked for. This is image versus reality in brick and lime. Elegance upstairs, chemistry downstairs, and a truce drawn in wood, tar, and lime wash. Architects were sent cartographers. They placed garderobes on outer walls where wind could borrow the problem, and take it sightseeing, then disguised the apertures behind carved screens, so no one had to make eye contact with physics. Shafts were parched smooth to discourage what crawls. Trapstones were set at the bend to confuse what climbs. If a palace boasts symmetry, the nose tells you which wing contains the truth. Laundries here, kitchens there, privies yonder, and a chapel dead centre to shame them all into behaving. Court cleanliness begins on blueprints, not in basins. At dawn you meet the heroes nobody toasts, night soil crews. They arrive like rumour control. Quiet, thorough, slightly amused, hauling pails, shovels, and a ledger that assigns blame without raising voices. Lime is sprinkled like punctuation. Loads leave through postern gates before the courteous perfumes wake up, then travel to fields where usefulness is reborn under someone else's sky. The loop is tidy if the schedule stays honest. When it slips, stench writes the minutes and the corridor remembers who lied. Ventilation is a temperamental god. Vents that draft beautifully in autumn backtalk in summer. A helpful breeze turns traitor when a new gallery blocks its lane. A tapestry hung for dignity becomes a sponge for yesterday. Servants learn microclimates by heart. Open this casement 2 fingers at dawn, that one not at all afternoon, and never the pair that lets kitchen smoke and privy air declare a treaty. Palace routine, reality, is less sparkling purity than hundreds of tiny yes, no decisions performed on time. Etiquette operates as plumbing with manners. Distance at table isn't just rank, it's airflow. Pomanders swing at a pace that reads pious and actually measures as filtration. Gloves keep garlic from becoming memoir. Vinegar hand rinses are placed where conversation needs to reset. You think of ceremonial grooming as combs and colognes, but here it's choreography for nostrils. A fan opens to cool a temper, closes to trap an indiscreet whiff, and flicks once to warn a servant that a candle is bullying the drought. Cesspits are libraries of mistakes. When builders forget clay liners, liquids shake hands with foundations. When rainwater downspouts marry waste shafts, festivals discover humility. Good pits have sacrificial bricks you can remove, stir, and restore like a paragraph being edited. The steward keeps a table of intervals, months for this wing, weeks for that staircase, and a red mark for the one shaft that lies about being empty. Behind the throne, the bravest sentence is "We pumped it early." Smell becomes politics in a heartbeat. A visiting duke lodges in the good suite and writes home about civilization. A lesser cousin lands over a sulky drain and starts a war of anecdotes. A quick fix, incense, reed mats, citrus peel, lavender water, buys an hour but never a reputation. Markets trust noses more than mottos. That's where royal hygiene myths are born or buried, not in proclamations, but in where the corridors stop smelling like yesterday when the crowd arrives. The kin war is constant and friendly. Roasting smoke wants to move in with pastry steam. Fish argues with sugar. The scullery swears innocence while onions confess. The head cook bargains with vents, baffles and timing until the great hall smells like appetite instead of autobiography. On feast days charcoal is rationed by aroma. White meats first, then the sweet course, then spiced wine to rewrite the air. When a dinner smelled glorious, you were sniffing engineering, not just rosemary. Illness changes the script. During plague seasons, doors that used to welcome drafts become judges. Cloths soaked in vinegar hang like little treaties. The garderobe gets lined daily until it looks like a snowdrift with opinions. Physicians demand smoke of juniper. Priests demand smoke of prayers. Servants demand breaks that keep them human. Everyone agrees on one thing. Flows must flow, and stagnation is a coup. Palace routine reality turns devotional when fear climbs the stairs. Servants carry the map in their bones. The maid who knows which step creaks also knows which vent lies. The page who times torches also times perfumes. The porter who swaps rushes recognizes when rushes start telling stories. Dignity depends on their wrists, and they depend on a schedule that respects sleep. The miracle isn't that palaces were fresh, it's that they were navigable, with hundreds of warm bodies, cooking fires, animals, visitors, and a weather system called history slamming into the walls. Punishment for failure isn't always formal. Odor demotes reputations. A sour corridor gets nicknamed after arrival. A suite with a moody drain quietly stops hosting the persuasive. That's why the best households invested in airflow, the way merchants invest in ships. Dend on chimneys, chutes, gaskets, glaziers. Reward the person who notices the day the wind married the wrong shaft. Aristocratic upkeep lives or dies on the attention you pay to things that don't make portrait. By nightfall, the geography resets. Pits capped, gates washed, herbs renewed, and a soft veil of scent folded over rooms with long memories. You'd never know a small army fought the invisible all day, unless you touched the ledgers and saw the marches noted in chalk and lime. Tomorrow, the battle continues, but with allies you didn't expect. Perfumed gloves, pomanders, incense cones, and little silver tools that keep foul air from becoming rumour and rumour from becoming policy. Shall we open the dressing table and see how a lemon, a clove, and a hollowed orange peel can rescue a throne room? Open the dressing table, and you're basically opening a tiny apothecary with a sense of humour. Bottles wink in amber and green. Citrus peels dry into little bowls. A silver grater waits beside a jar of clove buds, like a polite threat against halitosis. The air is layered. Top notes of orange blossom, a mid of rosemary and mint, and a slow, serious bass of musk that says the conversation will not be rushed. Here, scent is more than flirtation, it's policy. You'll watch a ruler argue with the room using mere ounces, an image versus reality duel fought with oils instead of decrees. Start with the gloves. Kid leather, butter soft, massaged with fragrant oils until they breathe in a sweet, measured way. Slip them on, and your hands become polite all by themselves. Perfumed gloves went about hiding filth, so much as declaring temperature. Warm, approachable, and clean enough to pass a document without making the scribe step back. When the glove lifts to a face, the faint citrus tells the audience you prepared for them. That's the quiet heart of ceremonial grooming. Signal care without ever announcing effort. Next, the pomander, the original portable air filter. It's a hollowed orange studded with cloves, or a filigree silver sphere packed with scented pasties. Ambergris, civet in tiny, tiny amounts, powdered rose petals bound with gum. Worn on a chain, or slipped into a sleeve, it turns a crowded corridor into a manageable climate zone. You don't crush rooms with perfume. You carry a private weather system. In a world before HVAC, this is genius behind the throne. The kind the audience never credits and always appreciates. Smelling bottles, salts, vinegars, herbal spirits are not just fainting props from novels. A quick whiff of rosemary spirit sharpens the mind. Lavender waters tame a headache before it votes. A brisk vinegar with mint cuts through banquet fog, where sweet wines and roasted meats arm wrestle for dominance. Used sparingly, these are steering wheels for mood. Used clumsily, they read as panic. The best attendants manage timing like conductors. One sniff, not two, hand withdrawn before anyone thinks the sovereign needs saving. Powders and sachets take over where closets try to misbehave. Linen chests wear little pillows stuffed with dried rose, marjoram and a whisper of orris root. Wardrobes hide a citrus rind that keeps moths and gossip at bay. Starch gets scented for collars and cuffs so fresh. Walks into the room first. That's the daily algebra of palace routine reality. 1,000 small preventions that cost less than one big apology. Incense is the heavy artillery. A single cone can rewrite a chapel, a council chamber, even a sulking hallway. Frankincense for gravity myrrh, for calm benzoin, for a clean sweetness that makes stone seem kinder. But it's measured like spice. Too much and the room feels pious to the point of unbreathable. Great households had a one-cone rule, unless a plague physician overruled them because scent is authority. Overuse it, and people feel bossed instead of held. The nose rank 2. A courtier arrives in powdered iris and faint violet. Respectful, not competitive. An ambassador from humid coasts brings sharper citrus and metal brighter tars. The sovereign stays consistent, changing blends only with season or state. Consistency is reputation's cologne. When rumours fly, a familiar fragrance says, "We're the same house you trusted last month." This is aristocratic upkeep in its subtlest form. Make, identity, smell like reliability. Of course, there's the dark corner. Counterfeits and overreach. Cheap musk that turns sour in heat, oils cut with rancid fat sachets, stuffed with haze solders, fields of Provence. A bad batch can assassinate a mood faster than any speech. Trusted apothecaries were as prized as goldsmiths, and why the laundry kept a veto. If a scent clung past reason, linens revolted. A tidy truth. The laundry had more power over policy than poets ever got to admit. Etiquette grows from practicality. You scent wrists and throat, not garments so fabric doesn't ferment. You refresh between rooms, not in them, so nobody watches the trick. You match the blend to the hour, like you match words to an audience. Morning, light, talkative, citrus and herbs. Afternoon, floral tempered with powder. Resin and patience. Do it right and people say, the meeting went well without knowing why. Do it wrong and someone coughs, and now the vote is late. Sometimes smell is triage. After a heated debate, a quick pass of mint vinegar cloths resets the table. After a long reception, a pomander stroll replaces 10 minutes of vent wrangling. After a funeral, myrtle and rose let grief sit without souring. None of this erases reality. It frames it so minds can keep working. That's the sane core beneath the so-called royal hygiene myths, not lies, but stagecraft used to make hard days survivable. Servants carry 1,000 micro-recipes in their heads. A teaspoon of orange flour in a basin tames a sick room. Thyme and bay in the boiler keep bath steam honest. A slice of lemon rubbed on a pewter cup cancels last night's garlic. You'll never see these in portraits, and that's the point. True polish is invisible. The public smells serenity. The staff smells the cost and pays it on time. And yet, there's a sharper mirror to hold up. What happens when the face itself becomes a canvas? Powders that whiten, rouges that sing, concoctions that promise perfection and sometimes buy it with poison. Scent can smooth, but makeup can transform, and the portrait painter will not record the rash beneath the veil of pearl. If you're ready, we'll open the cosmetic chest next. Lead, mercury, rice powder, rose balm, and watch image versus reality play its riskiest game right on the skin. Shall we? Open the cosmetic chest, and the room goes quiet. The way people hush before a risky trip. Boxes of pearl-dusted powder, little pots of balm, sticks of colour that promise roses to tired cheeks. Everything gleams with possibility, but closer in you catch the metallic whisper of risk. White lead softened with vinegar, mercury compounds that shine like moonlight and bite like wolves, perfumes meant to mask the bargain. This is where image versus reality stops being philosophy and becomes chemistry you wear on your face. Everyone in the room understands. Transformation is power, and power always sends a bill. The all is simple to say and hard to survive. Erase last night, broadcast figure, edit pause into obedience. A lady's maid folds a towel under the chin, taps powder like snowfall, and speaks in the calm voice of someone landing a skiff in choppy water. Ceruse spreads like a white lie, flawless from 3 paces, treacherous from 1. A touch of rouge rescues blood that overslept. A violet wash hides yellow in the whites of eyes. If a portraitist walks in, the result reads immortal. If a physician walks in, it reads, "We'll talk later." Why the pale face at all? Rank has always flirted with scarcity. Tan means labour. Pallor means one's chores are abstract. Add candlelit rooms and smoky halls, and you see why skin needed stage lights. Powder killed shine and threw a flattering fog over texture. It also turns sweat and oil into paste if the evening ran long. Here's the tug of war behind the throne. Authority wants to look effortless. Biology wants to be human. Makeup negotiates, sometimes brilliantly, sometimes like a courtier who drinks past sense. Enter the apothecary with both halos and horns. Some recipes are kind: rice powder, orris root, crushed pearl cut with chalk, rose balm whipped with beeswax to soften lips bullied by winter. Others are career-ending if you push your luck. Sublimate of mercury to banish freckles, white lead that tightens like flattery and flakes like gossip. Arsenic waters whispered to brighten. These jars are labelled in beautiful hands because handwriting is the first perfume. The deeper truth: fear of blemish sponsors more bad science than vanity ever did. Application is choreography. First, a wash, vinegar and rose, or milk warmed till it sighs. Then a seal of almond or olive oil to keep powders from courting pores too closely. A puff kisses cheeks and forehead, the maid works it outward with a feather, and the mirror answers kindly. Rouge follows, cochineal or madder, diluted to morning rumour, rather than midnight scandal. Brows get a nudge, lashes a brush of soot and resin that threatens to smudge the minute a secret is funny. Ceremonial grooming at this level isn't play, it's small theatre with diplomatic stakes. The problem is cumulative. One dazzling evening. Fine, party no, da, contishi, day mine, and Lord of Wham, Elder Mistugaden, that's just fine, wake up. A season of them? The skin tires, tightens, cracks along habitual smiles, and begs for a holiday it rarely receives. To fix yesterday's mask you add today's, and the spiral begins. Under powder, tiny sores hide like unpaid debts. Under rouge bursts of capillaries audition for permanence. The irony would make a saint grin. The closer you get to perfect, the more maintenance bills arrive. That's routine reality, not wickedness, just math with pause. Removal becomes its own liturgy. Oil loosens the day's decisions. Breadcrumbs or soft cloths lift pigment. A rinse of barley water or chamomile convinces skin to forgive. Some households keep a secret weapon: egg white masks that dry to a drum-type film, then peel away, taking a layer of regret. It works until it doesn't, and the skin rebels. The best maids know when to switch to mercy. Fewer layers, more sleep, a walk where faces don't have to sell policies. Mercy, like powder, has excellent optics. Breath tells on everyone. All the rouge in Christendom won't rescue a mouth that's sprinted through wine and spiced sauces. So the cosmetic chest hides tooth powders, salt, burnt bread, clove, and tiny bottles of myrrh to rinse a tongue that wants to be taken seriously. A sliver of candied angelica, for after, a fennel seed for before, a silver toothpick that doubles as status and floss. Paint the lips red, yes, but make the mouth trustworthy. Nothing detonates royal hygiene myths faster than beauty that speaks in garlic. Wigs complicate the portrait further. Powdered hair frames, powdered skin like snow round a sunrise, but powders migrates into eyes, onto collars, across anyone bold enough to hug. Fixes a veil while dusting a fan, while seating, and a prayer while laughing. Beneath the scalp dislikes all of this on principle. Here, the cosmetic chest reaches for oils, rosemary for the brave, bay for the worried, to soothe under the armour. When portraits make the whole look serene, remember there's a pharmacist off stage taking notes. Men are not exempt, like a king's barber keeps discreet. Rouges for cheeks that insist on winter, a tiny black pencil to firm a thinning brow, and a spirit of wine to brighten eyes that met too much parchment. The beard gets oiled, the lips get a whisper of balm, and powder calms the shine on a forehead that must not reflect torchlight like a guilty conscience. Grooming is policy in a doublet. If the face reads steady, the realm feels steadier. Call it aristocratic upkeep, translated into stubble and scent. Scandal, when it arrives, wears a rash. Courtiers whisper that so-and-so owes the moon her colour, meaning Mercury. A duchess never sweats, meaning lead, taught her paws to hold grudges. Painters get blamed for flattery. Maids quit rather than be complicit. The apothecary starts adding rice to everything and praying. The smart households pivot. More linen changes, more walks, less theatre between festivals. Even the portrait style softens. Less porcelain, more candlelit humanity, because public taste can sniff risk even when it can't name compounds. The chest isn't the villain. Tools are only as wise as their schedules. Used lightly, powders are umbrellas for nerves. Used thoughtfully, colour restores the readable face. Used mercifully, balms help the weather apologize. The true disaster is tempo. Too many audiences. Too much pretending. Not enough air. Which is why the next room matters more than any mirror. The wardrobe and laundry syndicate that rescues skin by letting fabric do the heavy lifting. Ready to meet the linen that actually kept royalty. Clean, when water, paint and politics disagree. Start with the first thing you don't see in portraits, the underlayer. A fine linen shift sits closest to the skin, quietly drinking sweat oils and nerves so outer garments can pretend to be immortal. Change the shift and, presto, the body feels reset without a full plunge into a tub. That's the unglamorous core of image versus reality at court. Water was costly to heat, risky in drafty palaces, and slow, but linen could be swapped fast. If you've ever changed into a fresh t-shirt after a brutal day, you already speak this royal dialect of clean. Follow the fabric, and you'll find the empire under the embroidery. Laundry isn't a room, it's a machine. Cauldrons roar, paddles beat rhythm into stains, and lye gets cut with ash or fuller's earth, so fibres don't lose their temper. Bleaching lawns spread cloth like surrendered flags, under a watch that times light as carefully as council does speeches. The schedule is a choreography. Boil, beat, rinse, blue, dry, air, fold, tag. Palace routine reality lives in those intervals more than in any scented bottle on the dressing table. Whiteness is not an aesthetic, it's a yardstick. Bluing with a pinch of indigo tricks the eye into reading snow instead of cream. And snow says virtue even when yesterday argued otherwise. But every victory costs threads. Too much lie shaves years off a sleeve. Too much sun makes honesty brittle. A smart laundress reads fabric like a physician reads pulses, adjusting strength, timing, and rinse, saving heroics for state visits and funerals. When you see a ruff that looks like daylight froze in place, you're admiring calculus, not just starch. Speaking of starch, it's armour you can iron. Ruffs and cuffs are the court's billboards, and starch lets them hold opinionated shapes. Scented starch, rose, lavender, sometimes orange flower, turns entrances into small weather events. The downside? Abrasion and itch, especially where edges kiss skin. Balance is the whole game, crisp enough to read discipline, soft enough that a sovereign can nod without bleeding. Linen teaches politics to behave, like cloth, structured, breathable and mended before it tears. Mending is its own guild of miracles. Invisible darns, drawn thread repairs, and cunning patches keep garments in public service long past what pride would confess. A lady's maid keeps a quiet basket for emergency stitches that must not become anecdotes. A valet knows which seam fails when tempers rise. Tags, knots and chalk codes track ownership through wash cycles like tiny passports. Here's behind the throne in pure thread. Reputation preserved one discreet stitch at a time. Wardrobes double as climate control. Summer means whisper-thin linen, layered like good arguments. Winter calls for wool, lined with fur and shifts swapped more often to outrun heavy cloth smooth. Cedar shavings, smoke-cured closets, and herb sachets, thyme, rosemary, orris, police moths, and memory. Airing day is liturgy. Garments hung where light is kind, and wind is honest, perfumes closed until the fabric's own breath returns. You're not just guarding clothes, you're resetting the nose of a building. Beds tell the truth faster than banquets. Sheets change on a stricter timer than politics. Nightly in summer, every other night in winter, unless illness votes otherwise. Warmed pans kiss the mattress, curtains air. Mattresses are beaten like stubborn ideas. Bedbugs get the full playbook, scolding, freezing, smoke, and sun. When visitors brag that a royal suite smells like morning, they're praising staff who fought biology through the night and won by lint's wit. Travel multiplies the math. On progress, linen rides ahead in labelled chests, clean sets staged at relay houses, so the sovereign never meets yesterday by accident. River days are laundry days. Rain rewrites plans. A crosswind can turn a bleaching lawn into a comedy if weights aren't placed just so. Quartermasters count shirts like treasurers count coin. A state visit that looks effortless on arrival smells that way because a week of boiling water shook hands with a map. Etiquette wraps itself around fabric like a second weave. Morning, Livy. New shift, new collar, cuffs that signal. Awake. Chapel. Softer starch and quieter scent. Hunt. Coarser linen that forgives mud and a faster wash cycle. Cast-offs don't vanish. They're gifted down the ladder, mended again, then turned into rags, then into lamp wicks. Nothing proves court cleanliness is a system, not a vibe, more than a rag that once attended council, now keeping a corridor lamp polite. The ledger has a nose. Iron audits track losses, shrinkage, and suspicious misplacements. Fines don't fix theft. They fix carelessness. A clever steward budgets more for soap in humid months and buys ash by the cart when wool is fashionable, because wool means more shifts, more friction, more washing. The glory of aristocratic upkeep is not the silk on top. It's the river of linen beneath that keeps silk from turning into a rumour. Smell is the referee. Clean cloth moves through rooms like an unspoken apology for yesterday's crowds. Stale cloth multiplies grievances before anyone speaks. Sachets in chests, citrus in wardrobes, vinegar in the final rinse. These keep fabric from becoming biography. And the best trick, rest days for heavy garments, so scent evaporates and fibers forgive. Clothing has moods. The smartest households schedule them. So yes, baths mattered, but linen carried the weekday load. When fabric does the heavy lifting, skin survives, paint wigs forgive powder, and rooms keep their tempers. Next we have to talk about the people who make that miracle daily. Valets, maids, barbers, laundresses, the human engine of grace under deadlines, and the private rules they lived by to keep sovereigns presentable when history was not. Ready to go downstairs into the servants' hall, where order learns to walk on two tired feet. Down the back stair, the palace wakes in a different key. Thardan's hall smells of yeast, lye, lamp smoke, and wet wool, steaming by the fire. Spoons clink, boots thud, and a bell taps once for silence, so the steward can read the day's assignments. You're looking at the gearbox that makes splendor believable. Faces that won't appear in portraits, hands that will touch every object a ruler uses before noon. If clean is a promise, these are the people who sign it daily, with the quiet confidence of those who know where the corridors actually bend. A valet's morning begins before light, has an opinion, checks the bed like a detective, creases, crumbs, the faint map of a dream, and then stages the dressing room as if setting a trap for disorder. Basin warmed, cloths folded to exact sizes, combs laid from wide teeth to fine like a sentence tightening toward a point. He can judge mood by footfall and trim the day's sleeves to match it. That faint vinegar in the air, insurance for the impulsive handshake. That missing chair, removed because the sovereign leans on it when anxious and today calls for backbone. Not props. Across the corridor the lady's maid walks a similar wire with different thunderheads. She has the skin's diary memorized, which cheek flushes under praise, which powder sulks in damp weather, which ribbon diffuses an argument by simply existing. Her hands move like apologies, fast, decisive. She can reline a bodice in 10 breaths, reframe a face in 5, and invent a hairstyle that hides last night's headache, without admitting there was one. Her toolkit is half sewing basket, half emotional first aid kit. Enter the barber surgeon, equal parts stylist, chemist, and triage nurse. His combs are heated, his razors stropped like small sermons, his spirits of wine measured to brighten without staggering. A scalp inspection might rescue a counsel from the tyranny of an itch. A nick caught early might prevent a week of gossip about decline. He oils beards into diplomacy and whispers warnings about powders that clog pores faster than flattery. If the sovereign must look effortless, someone must sweat the effort. He's paid to do it with a smile and no fingerprints. Laundresses are the palace's lungs. Cauldrons roll like far-off thunder, while paddles beat cloth to a rhythm older than treaties. Ash cuts lie. Indigo kisses, rinse water, and steaming heaps travel to bleaching lawns where geese complain about the weather like underpaid critics. These women know which stains confess to boiling, and which require mercy. They can blue a cuff to the exact note that reads snow rather than cloud. When people boast of court cleanliness, they unknowingly praise forearms and timing. The steward is the orchestra's metronome. He speaks the language of linen counts, coal allowances, and hallway climates. Ledgers carry columns for soap, starch, vinegar, rushes, and unexpected incidents, a polite umbrella over wine, blood, and human nature. His gift is calibration. 3 more baskets to the Queen's apartments, because guests laughed loudly last night. Fewer braziers on the east side, because the wind has decided to be generous. An extra valet for the prince, who argues with buttons when nervous. Training is a code, not a pamphlet. New staff memorize the 4-inch rule, how far a chair leg lives from a wall, the 2-finger rule, how much a casement opens at dawn, and the silence rule, never describe a smell, remove it. They learn to walk without announcing their ankles, and to fold without letting cloth, remember their hands. Humor is permitted, cynicism forbidden. The motto is simple. We keep the future from smelling like yesterday. Crisis is where professionalism earns its capital letters. A rip before an audience. A maid slides a thread through fabric so cleanly even pride doesn't feel it. A sleeve stained by an overeager sauce. The valet performs a vinegar rescue behind a screen, while the Kapellmeister improvises 3 graceful bars. A sudden nosebleed in the antechamber. The barber arrives with cold coin, tilt cloth. No drama, only sequence. This is palace routine reality at full brightness. Procedure quicker than panic. Dignity saved by choreography. The moral economy runs on more than wages. Tips, leftover, pastries, cast-off gloves. These travel down the staircase as rewards for speed and discretion. But the true currency is trust. A servant who can absorb a secret without altering a breath becomes a hinge on which the whole machine swings. Gossip exists, of course. The whole is human. Difference is aim. Stories are stored to prevent harm, not to cause it. That's the quiet heroism behind the throne. Complicity with order, not with deceit. Night has its own crew and its own tenderness. Candles are pinched to embers, so corridors remember. They are corridors, not rumours. Ash is sifted so sparks don't misbehave in their sleep. Chamber pots are evacuated with the practiced diplomacy of people who never want a smell to learn their names. The watchword is preventative mercy. What you fix at 2 in the morning never needs to be discussed at 10. If serenity is a performance, the midnight crew writes its best lines. Servants also manage psychology with a care that would impress a clinic. A valet swaps a heavy scent for a green one when temper runs hot. The lady's maid offers a combing that lasts exactly as long as it takes anger to become a decision. The barber schedules a trim for the hour. The face usually droops. So mirrors tell a kinder truth right before a vote. This is ceremonial grooming as emotional architecture. The craft of keeping power humane by keeping the body comfortable enough to choose wisely. And then there's the oath of invisibility, kept in 1,000 tiny choices. A laugh swallowed, so a guest can save face. A door held an inch longer so 2 rivals don't collide. A stain spotted on a royal cuff and removed before it can become rumour. When you praise a ruler's poise, you're really applauding a chorus of hands that decided not to be seen. But even the best hands can't win against certain enemies alone. Sickness, stink that claims a season, superstitions dressed as medicine. To see how the human engine copes when hygiene meets fear, let's open the physician's door and leaf through the remedies. Good, bad, and breathtakingly odd, that kept the court upright when the city coughed. Physician's chamber smells like thyme, spirits of wine, and the nervous sweetness of honey. Shelves carry glass as thin as excuses and jars thick as certainty, each labelled in a hand that wants the world to stay legible. Mortars sit like small drums, pestles waiting to turn roots into reasons. You're not in a sorcerer's den. You're in an early clinic where confidence and caution take turns. This is where image versus reality gets its pulse counted before breakfast. Triage begins with eyes and breath, not magic. A valet reports sleep, appetite, the colour of a cough. The physician watches how fast the sovereign stands, whether the hand returns to the same temple twice. Pulse is read with 2 fingers, and a patience that would shame a banker. Is it heat or damp, nerves or news? The doctor asks the room more than the body, because in a palace, illness and policy often share a spoon. Good practice is mostly listening. Remedies have a personality. Honey is the diplomat, soothing throats, covering bitterness, bribing compliance. Vinegar is the judge, cutting grease, washing wounds, scolding air with cloths hung in doorways. Barley water whispers to stubborn stomachs. Mint persuades a fainting mood to stand up and argue properly. When fevers stage a coup, cool cloths and quiet rooms do more than speeches. You start to admire how much health is choreography. Light, airflow, timing. Then comes the theatre, no one quite trusts. Bloodletting and cupping. A cautious nick, a measured ounce, a promise it will balance what the stars or humours upset. Sometimes it buys sleep, sometimes it buys pallor and regret. The wiser physicians use it sparingly, preferring rest, broth, and the radical treatment called stop hosting arguments for a day. The barber surgeon, standing by with lint and vinegar, knows which nobles love dramatic cures, and which prefer results. Plague seasons rewrite the etiquette of breathing. Doorways sprout cloths, soaked in rosemary vinegar. A brazier burns juniper where drafts gossip. Visitors wash hands in a basin that smells like risol. The sovereign's public shrinks to a measured corridor, and handshakes learn the art of bowing at a distance. Court cleanliness stops being a boast and becomes a map. This stair up, that stair sealed, this suite aired, that one resting. Fear is managed by schedule. Tooth and mouth care the most delicate diplomacy of all, earns a shrine of its own. Powders of salt charcoal clove, twigs chewed to frayed brushes, a silver pick that rescues dignity after garlic, breath rinses sting on purpose, the way truth sometimes has to. A ruler who smells like order commands order. That quiet rule underpins half the royal hygiene myths. Portraits won't admit it, diaries do. Urine flasks. Physicians swirl, sniff, and pronounce with care. Too sweet, too hot, too pale, just right. It's primitive compared to your pharmacy, but not foolish. Pattern recognition saves more mornings than amulets ever did. Speaking of which, charms hang here, too, politely. They don't cure. They pace nerves so other cures can work. Supply chains are medicine in disguise. The apothecary sends rosemary, orris, mastic, and clean jars. The brewery schedules lighter beer for invalids. The kitchen's broth ledger mirrors the pulse chart. When roads flood, medicine thins. When caravans arrive, confidence fattens. The steward tracks it all with the same seriousness he reserves for silver. Health isn't just herbs, it's arrivals. The sick room has rules that sound like kindness and read like engineering. Curtains half drawn to stop drafts without stopping light. Voices lower than worry. A bowl of water where moonlight can find it. So fear has something calm to look at. Linen changed before shame asks. Chamber pot removed before language notices. This is palace routine reality. Distilled, reduce friction so bodies can choose healing. Superstition is managed, not mocked. A priest mutters a brief blessing at the threshold. A charm sits by the pillow more for the pulse than the cosmos. The physician nods because belief changes breathing, and breathing changes outcomes. When remedies fail, the room still refuses panic. Count the breaths, cool the brow, carry the news with dignity. In palaces, even grief keeps a schedule so futures don't collapse. Recovery, when it comes, is staged like a return to office. First day, sit in council, but speak less. Second, walk the garden at the hour the body usually sours. Third, receive only those who don't practice anxiety as a sport. Meals climb slowly from broth to bite. Scents shift from resin to citrus to announce we're back. Ceremonial grooming becomes gentle again. Combs slow, cloths warm, mirrors kind. The public reads steadiness and relaxes. And if recovery doesn't come on time, portrait painters get busier. Cosmetics brighten, linen changes faster, rooms tilt toward flattery light. The face must look like continuity, even when the spine is negotiating. That bridge between body and legend is staffed by maids, valets, physicians, and a painter who understands mercy. Which raises the next question. How did courts manufacture health in oils and silk so successfully that history sometimes believed the canvas over the diaries? Let's step into the portrait studio and wardrobe hall where fabric, light and posture made resilience look inevitable. The portrait studio is a quiet conspiracy. Open the door and you meet dust motes rehearsing in sunbeams, canvases lean like patient jurors, and a painter who speaks softly to keep colours from startling. A north window turns daylight into mercy. A screen diffuses it further until wrinkles forget their lines. On a side table, bowls of crushed pigments, lead white, vermilion, azurite, wait like obedient storms. If you want to see image versus reality without a soapbox, watch a brush persuade skin to remember sleep. It never had. Before the first stroke, wardrobe stages its invasion. Two attendants enter with gowns stiff as architecture and doublets that hold opinions, each piece pre-pinned to pretend better posture. They pull the waist into diplomacy. Pads lift a shoulder that sulked. A lace hides a seam that lost an argument with yesterday. Tailor's chalk nibbles here, the maid smooths there, and suddenly the body reads like a statement instead of a paragraph. It's not deception, it's translation. Light is the monarch here, and the painter is its chamberlain. He swings a reflector, polished board, pale cloth, a dish of water until the face catches a gentler geometry. Strong light for vigour, soft light for grace, a whisper of shadow at the jaw, to make resolve look inevitable. He will paint eyes as if they own their own window, and he'll lower the mouth's corners by a whisper, so kindness doesn't turn to sentiment. By the time the sitter inhales, the room has already chosen a legend. Sitting is a sport. The sovereign learns how to rest weight on the tailbone without looking tired, how to float hands or veins. Don't draft a subplot, how to aim the chin where pride looks awake, but not peevish. A valet times micro breaks around glaze layers. A lady's maid patrols for shine, with a cloth that smells faintly of rose. Painters call it patience. Bodies call it bargaining. One cough and a week of careful drapery will ripple like gossip. Textiles are painted biographies. Nuance. The blue is not blue, it's dynasty and coin. The sable is not fur, it's winter solved with money. The linen cuff isn't white, it's laundry hours disguised as innocence. The painter builds them in layers so they breathe. Thin scumbles for sheen, fat strokes for authority, knife-scraped edges where light bites. Will soften a seam that points at the belly, sharpen one near the shoulder to say, "Remember my sword." Wardrobe hall and easel speak the same dialect, shape the gaze before the sentence arrives. Faces are edited like minutes. Lead white lifts under eye hollows. A chew of vermilion returns a mouth from exile. A stipple of grey cools a temple that pulsed through counsel. Painter keeps a tray of good lies, glazes that hide a stubborn spot, an extra catchlight that sells vigour to ministers with doubts. Meanwhile, the physician mutters about air and rest, and the barber smooths a brow. So brushstrokes want chase, a frown. Canvas becomes a committee where hope has seniority. Hands, though, hands betray and must be taught manners. The right hand holds a glove so veins pass for embroidery. The left rests on a balustrade that doesn't wobble in paint the way it did in carpentry. Fingers are lengthened with shadow, cuticles softened with a touch of oil, and gold rings are tilted toward moral, rather than fiscal brightness. Many a realm has survived a tired eye, but a nervous hand can bankrupt a picture. The painter refuses to let that happen. Props are paragraphs. A book says, "I can read." A map says, "I can reach." A sprig of rosemary says, "I remember." A skull might whisper mortality for the pious. A miniature of a spouse anchors diplomacy without adding a chair. Even the background counts. A storm quieted on the horizon. A column suggesting laws that don't fall over in a breeze. Drapery that behaves like a well-governed river. Everything is grammar for a sentence whose verb is endure. Copies make the legend portable. Once the master version gets its seal, assistants run a relay, miniatures for brooches, large canvases for embassies, prints for the hopeful. Each iteration simplifies the trick. Fewer glazes, broader lights, cleaner jawlines. The farther the portrait travels, the healthier the sitter becomes. Distance is a generous painter. That's why Royal Hygiene myths age so well on walls. They were designed to commute. Wardrobe hall keeps the illusion breathing between sessions. A dress worn in the studio goes straight to airing, not to dinner. The doublet that behaved under paint rests 2 days so salt doesn't write its own memoir. Labels read like weather reports. Safe for candlelight, dangerous under noon, add sash when anxious. This is palace routine reality rendered in fabric. Systems that prevent a legend from sweating through its shirt. Behind the easel, politics writes footnotes. A recovering ruler gets more blue, less shadow. A grieving queen gets softer sleeves and a veil painted thinner than truth so resilience can shine through. Ambassadors read these pages like traders read winds, and the court knows it. The painter isn't lying. He's drafting a promise the realm needs to believe long enough to make it real. That's the noblest use of ceremonial grooming, to lend the future its first good rumour. When the varnish cures and the frame clicks into place, the room exhales. The portrait glows as if light decided to live there. Silk looks audible. Skin looks elected. Courtiers swear the sitter has never looked better. Diaries admit everyone slept more easily that week. But outside the studio, air will try to win, water will bargain, and rumour will patrol. To see how a picture survives contact with corridors and crowds, we have to open the public rooms, audiences, levees, staircases, and watch how smell, posture, and timing keep the canvas from being contradicted by the day. Shall we step into the throne room, where footsteps edit truth? Step into the antechamber and feel how the air changes before the eyes. Carpets mute ambition. Waxed floors hold a lemony hush. Braziers sip at a resin that reads as calm without sounding like chapel. Ushers arrange people as if composing a paragraph. Subject here, verb there, adjectives far from each other. The trick is obvious once you see it. Manage the air and you manage the mood. This is palace routine reality, working in plain sight, timers, roots and scents tuned so the room never has to raise its voice. The levee is part laundry schedule, part sermon. As the sovereign moves, a breeze of fresh linen follows. Cuffs crisp, rough, politely starched. Gloves breathing citrus instead of last night's sauce. A valet's hand hovers off stage with a cloth that erases shine before it becomes a rumour. Courtiers are spaced so perfumes don't quarrel. Petitioners are cued to speak in bursts, not paragraphs. You aren't witnessing vanity. You're watching crowd hygiene keep politics from fogging the glass. Sound design keeps tempers domesticated. Musicians in a side gallery knit soft patterns. Enough rhythm to pace the line, enough harmony to sand sharp edges off impatience. Shoes have rules on marble. Spurs are invited to whisper. Coughs are edited by mint pastilles, doled out like secrets. Even the banners help belling the room with faint cloth noises that make voices feel smaller than the ceiling. The result is neither silence nor chatter, but an audible handshake. Smell is the thinnest leash and the strongest. A cone of frankincense in the far colonnade says, "Law without paperwork." Bowls of rosemary water near doors reset the nostrils, after kitchens brag too loudly. A pomander stroll by a lady-in-waiting erases the accidental garlic of an ambassador's breakfast. Done well, nobody notices. Done badly, the crowd learns the wrong lesson, that the throne is fighting its own air. That's how royal hygiene myths are born, when maintenance forgets to be invisible. Staircases are theatres of altitude. At the foot, the odour of boots and the democracy of wool. Halfway up, a zone of polished wood and announcement. At the landing, the kingdom of silk and clean breath. Guards stand where drafts behave. Ushers funnel courtiers into lanes that keep jealousy from brushing sleeves. If someone swears the palace smells like dignity, they mean the staircase never lets cellar air climb faster than rank. Etiquette doubles as ventilation. Fans open in a tempo that creates small currents. Courtiers are taught which hand to free a glove with so citrus rides outward. The bow itself is airflow, chest forward, chin soft, a wave that carries scent away rather than into someone's patience. This is ceremonial grooming scaled for architecture. Each gesture cleans the moment, not just the person. You could diagram it like plumbing and still call it grace. The throne room is a machine masked as a miracle. Behind the dais, hidden shutters nudge sunlight into flattery. Above the cornice, a gap breathes out heat before it becomes anger. Under the carpets, sand eats footfall, so the sovereign's voice can live in a reasonable register. 2 stewards count people, and minutes the way apothecaries count drops. The meeting ends not when words run out, but when the air reaches the limit, beyond which minds turn into weather. Accidents happen, and choreography catches them. A candle sulks, a page glides with snuffer and joke. A child hiccups, the consort drops a sugared fennel seed into a handkerchief, and the echo of humour resets the balcony. A spilled drink disappears into linen that was expecting a hobby. When the sovereign coughs, the band leans fractionally louder, and the captain of ushers shortens the next speech by a sentence. None of this is panic. It's competence pretending to be good luck. Dining halls are public noses with tables, dishes sequenced by aroma. Broths first to warm fish early, before it thinks about autobiography, sweets last to launder the air. Perfumed gloves return between courses, so hands never tell tales. Vinegar handballs reset the table without asking for attention. If a banquet went beautifully, credit the menu's ventilation as much as the recipes. Kitchens may cook flavour, public rooms plate climate. Corridors are editorial margins. Between big rooms you pass through little truths. A bowl of myrtle water for fingers, a window cracked 2 fingers to scold a draught into manners. A servant with a folded cloth and the right to stop a duke if his sleeve is about to print sauce on diplomacy. Here behind the throne lives in plain clothes, tiny corrections that prevent anecdotes from getting born. The corridor's job is to make the next room plausible. Exits are as curated as entrances. Petitioners leave through cooler air, faces dabbed with a discreet cloth, given a sugared almond that replaces the taste of fear with sweetness. Footmen stagger departures, so rumours can't congeal on the stairs. Outside, a breeze greets them that smells faintly of pine tar and sun, a cue that the world is bigger than the whole, but the whole behaves. The memory they carry sells stability better than any proclamation. And yet public rooms are only half the syllabus. The other half happens on the road, where dust, rain, and improvised lodgings test every trick the palace taught itself. If you want to see the illusion travel, how linen survives saddles, how perfumes argue with mud, how levies pop up in borrowed mansions, we've got to saddle up for royal progress. Shall we ride out and watch clean, attempt a long-distance relationship with reality? A royal progress looks glorious from a hillside. Banners, trumpets, sunlight on harness, and smells like wet leather, horse breath, and last night's smoke when you walk inside it. Dust wants to autograph everything. Green waits around the next bend with a joke about capes. You hear cart wheels groaning like old men. See laundry chests lashed tight as secrets, and feel how a travelling court turns any road into a moving household. This is image versus reality at a trot. The pageantry you wave at and the logistics you don't. Outriders carry a map you can't fold. Wind, water, shade. One rides ahead to sniff wells for honesty. Another tests a ford with a pole and an attitude. A third counts paces from camp to latrine, so dignity and breeze don't quarrel. A quartermaster points with a stick that's also a ruler. Fires here, horses there, kitchens downwind, sleeping tents upwind. Progress isn't wandering, it's choreography with mud on it. When it works, people mistake competence for luck. Hygiene begins with leather. Boots are scraped before prayers, oiled before arguments, and dried away from flames so they don't turn theatrical. Saddles get wiped with vinegar water that smells like caution. Blankets are beaten, while geese file complaints about process. A well-kept mount is half a bath. Sweat saved on the road is politeness saved in the antechamber. The best riders clean tack, as if it were teeth. The worst discover new languages from chafed seams. Bathing goes portable. Copper tubs travel nested like a family of stubborn geese. Boilers cough to life beside hedges. Canvas screens bloom into privacy, where yesterday was only hedgerow. Water is rationed by rank and temperature, by timetable. Elders first, then people who must look like continuity at the next stop. When fuel runs thin, clean by change. Rules the hour, fresh linen, sharp starch, lemon on wrists, and a comb that can talk a day into behaving. The laundry wagon is the caravan's conscience. Cauldrons ride with lids tied in sailors' knots. Bluing cakes live under lock like coin. A line of shirts flaps its white pinions across a meadow while scouts watch for weather and thieves. On overcast days, the steward orders airing only, and nobody sulks. On windy ones, cloth dries fast enough to give morale a second breakfast. Palace routine reality looks like 100 little victories that don't need applause to matter. Borrowed mansions have their own weather. You arrive to a hall that smells of wood smoke, parsley and ambition. The local lord bows, the local drains do not. A flying squad goes to war with windows, rushes and beds. Curtains aired, mattresses beaten, pomanders posted like sentries in doorways. The sovereign tours rooms picked for light drafts and the escape routes of rumour. Hosting royalty is part honour, part inspection. You didn't realise you scheduled. Public appearances on the road are smell and sound engineering, disguised as charm. A levee in a borrowed gallery needs citrus at the door, rosemary near the dais, and a band that knows how to play softer than the floorboards creak. After rain, straw paths keep wool honest and silk unhumiliated. After sunshine, parasols pour shade onto tempers. Courtiers are spaced by fragrance compatibility, not just precedence, because citron and amber should never break treaties in front of a mayor. Food and water decide whether the day ends in song or dentistry. Travel with their own knives and a suspicious mind. Boil everything twice. Trust no butter that sweats in the shade, and keep a special pot for safe broths when a village well tells tall tales. Wine gets cut with river water only after the river has been introduced to fire. Ale is judged by the way it sits on a spoon and the way a brewer meets your eye. A healthy quart smells like caramelized onions and clean cups. Night is a test more than a time. Tents inhale dew. Wool exhales stubbornly. A bed can be either prophecy or prank. Bedbugs consider royalty a compliment. So the guard captain enforces a drill. Freeze what you can. Scold what you must. Smoke what offends. The barber walks the rows like a priest with vinegar and comb. A laundress stands at dawn with a face that says she will personally fight any creature smaller than a thimble. Rain rewrites everything. Capes become walls, kitchens retreat under awnings, and a tunnel of canvas connects sleeping quarters to sanity. The steward listens to the wind like a navigator, and moves fires before sparks. Get political. Dry socks are promoted to strategy. A brazier in the wrong place is a resignation letter. You respect how quickly courtesy returns once heat does. The same people who arraign at noon can be weatherproof by supper. Etiquette travels on rails you don't see. The sovereign's handshakes shorten when the road has been long. Audiences are staged near windows that forgive faces. Gifts are chosen with noses in mind. Spices after a fishy river town, soap after a tannery, a bolt of linen when the local laundry salvaged the day. This is aristocratic upkeeper's diplomacy. Thank the exact labour that kept the illusion alive, and it will keep doing so without being asked twice. Progress ends with a smell you didn't expect. Stone that remembers your footfall corridors, already tuned to your breath. A bath that doesn't require a map. Yet the road leaves fingerprints. New ways to place windows. Better habits about wells. A sharper ear for rooms that lie. Travel humbles the myth and fortifies the method. Next we'll step into the private notebooks. Stewards' lists, maids' codes, physicians' margins, where the court told on itself in pencil, and the tidy difference between legend and Tuesday finally sits still. Open the steward's notebook, and the room changes temperature. The leather cover smells like smoke and beeswax. The pages whisper with graphite scars and blots of iron gall that look like constellations. Inside, columns for soap, starch, vinegar, rushes, tiny circles for don, faint crosses for dual twice. You don't find poetry. You find pulse. This is where image versus reality lives in numbers. 3 cones of incense for Council Day, 2 extra baskets to the east wing. When the wind sulks, a reminder to trim candle wicks, because soot turns tapestries into gossip. Next, the laundress's cloth ledger, soft from wet hands and stubborn weather. Swatches are pasted like trophies, linen grades with notes in plain. Proud script. For summer skin, for sick rooms, for princes who sweat like horses. There are codes you learn by feel. A blue thread means rush, processing. A red stitch means a stain that needs mercy, not war. Read closely and you'll see a philosophy. Clean isn't an accident, it's a cadence. If people praise court cleanliness, it's because these pages kept time when the sky didn't. The valet's pocketbook is the court's mood ring. He tracks cuff phrase, favourite scents, the hour a headache usually knocks. The human telemetry of power. Between lists he keeps little maps. Avoid the south corridor after rain. Seadex beside. When garlic is brave. Have mint cloth ready for Lord Z when he starts to rehearse. Outrage. This is behind the throne without the costume. Diplomacy distilled into towels and timing. If the sovereign looks unruffled, it's because someone rehearsed calm on paper first. Turn to the barber surgeon's daybook, and you meet a different honesty. Diagrams of moles and nicks, notes on powders that clog, or powders that behave. A sketch of a comb tooth filed to spare a tender patch. The painter will never meet. Margins carry verdicts no court will hear. Lead again, dangerous vanity, aloe steam only, draft unkind, trim early if counsel runs hot. He doesn't debate theology. He protects skin. Ceremonial grooming looks effortless because someone argued with physics at dawn. The apothecaries order sheets read like recipes for mood. Rosemary, orris, mastic myrrh. Quantities, sources, warnings about adulteration. The batch from the key smells of donkey and ambition. He logs which vintner's spirit of wine burns clean, which merchant's clothes arrive already tired, which perfumer starts rumours to move stock. You see procurement as public health. A bad shipment multiplies frowns. A good one buys a week of reasonable decisions. Economics, not magic, holds half the palace's breath. Open the head, housemaid's accident book, and you'll respect quiet heroes. Entries are brisk, almost cheerful. Ink on velvet, milk and patience. Fish in stairwell. Salt, then citrus, wine like a crime scene. Cold water, lies and speed. She grades hallways by honesty and carpets by appetite, and she writes the names of doors that never close kindly. Each solution is a story prevented. If royal hygiene myths survive, it's partly because this ledger strangled scandal before it learned to walk. The usher's seating diagrams are wind maps, disguised as manners. Arrows show perfume conflicts to avoid drafts to harness. Corners that eat sound, balconies that throw it back. Guests become airflow components. The citrus fellow near the colonnade, the musky dowager far from the soup. The cousin with opinions no closer than 2 seats to the ambassador with onions in his soul. Architecture teaches etiquette to behave like engineering, and suddenly a reception smells like order instead of autobiography. In the kitchen clerk's nightlist smell is rationed like coin. Roast early, ventilate. Fish after, fast and kind. Sweets at the end, so the room forgives. He notes grease traps by mood and assigns a boy to talk kindly to a sulking chimney with a broom and a prayer. Menu margins carry human footnotes. Serve broth to the minister who argues himself faint. Hide an tarts from the tenor until encore. Strategy wears an apron. You can taste it. The chaplain's vestry book, oddly, is part of the hygiene machine. He logs incense cones by feast and fast matches, psalms to room sizes, and notes which hymns clear air without turning the chapel into a cough. A penciled aside, one cone only on warm afternoons, the truly devout faint more convincingly. Here devotion meets airflow, and both behave. Scent becomes grammar, frankincense for gravity, myrrh for quiet, a thread of benzoin when sorrow needs room without souring. Back to the steward. His marginalia grow philosophical at month's end. We chase, smell the way we chase rumour. Earlier is kinder, he writes. Buy more linen than pride. Another line says, and you'll buy less apology. Budgets aren't just numbers, they're rehearsals for behaviour. He circles coal when the wind shifts soap, when wool returns to fashion, vinegar before Lent, and writes, thank. The laundresses publicly, like a sacristan writing, remember to breathe. In a small drawer lives the calm kit, a folded paper of lavender buds, a scrap of clean linen, a line from the Queen's hand. When voices climb, open the window 2 fingers and count 30 heartbeats. Not doctrine, it's muscle memory written down, accessible to any servant who needs to turn a panic into a procedure. That's the hidden architecture of palace routine reality. Tiny, portable instructions that let dignity survive contact with Tuesday. Finally, the painter's notebook. Swatches of silk painted under different lights, notes on how azurite behaves in damp rooms, a reminder that hands betray first and must be staged near velvet, not bare wood. There's a list of mercies, extra catchlight for the morning after bad news, less shadow under eyes when treaties drag. Avoid white next to sallow candles. Can a margin save a reign? Sometimes yes, because a margin saved a face, and the face saved an hour, and the hour saved a vote. Next we'll read the pages. No one wanted to write. Outbreaks, stink seasons, and the protocols for when elegance loses. How the crisis manuals turned palaces into hospitals without admitting defeat. Ready to crack the red-sealed drawer. The crisis drawer opens with a soft scrape, and the room seems to hold its breath. Inside are papers wax sealed in red, a folded floor plan, a short rosary of brass keys, and a scent that's half rosemary, half worry. This is the handbook for stink seasons and sudden fevers, the day when image versus reality is no longer a parlour game, but a logistics exam. Read the first line, and you feel the tone of a captain, not a courtier. Open windows by rule, not opinion. Close doors by need, not rank. Quarantine begins with geometry. Suites are converted into cells by moving chairs, not masonry. One door in, one door out, corridors rerouted so air has to behave. The steward chalks arrows on skirting boards. The usher hangs a sprig of rue on thresholds that are now one way. The chaplain shortens prayers so breath doesn't linger. Linen shifts double their rotations. Carpets are rolled to stop dust from telling stories. And brass bowls of vinegar water arrive where handshakes used to live. Palace routine reality switches from velvet to metronome. The smellscape changes first. Juniper and rosemary burn in corners. Cloths steeped in sharp vinegars swing like little pendulums at doorways. Kitchen smoke is told to mind its lane. You hear fewer vials, more buckets, fewer jokes, more ladles. A maid with a face like nerve carries a basket of pomanders that now do real work. Cloves for mouths that must speak. Citrus for rooms that must decide. Scent stops flirting and reports for duty. Triage is procedural and kind. The physician moves room to room with a clock in his head, counting pulse beats instead of anxieties. The barber follows with lint, spirits of wine, and a voice that steadies knees. The lady's maid becomes air traffic control for laundry. Timing changes, so fever never meets cold linen like a slap. Honey, barley, water, mint. Simple things, stage small victories. You realize the palace always rehearsed this, only quieter. Food becomes medicine in disguise. Broths are scheduled like decrees. Bread goes first to the hands that carry. Sweet wine is cut with boiled water and caution. A side kitchen is declared clean fire, and its pots don't mingle with the grand cuisine until the city forgives. Trenchers shrink, spoons multiply. Servants learn to pass dishes like messages, direct, brief, and without detours. It's not austerity, it's choreography that keeps appetites from turning into statistics. Etiquette adjusts without making a speech. Bows lengthen, so hands can rest. Audiences move outdoors under awnings that teach wind to be polite. Gloved fingers touch documents once, not thrice. Ceremonial grooming softens, less powder, more washing, less bravado scent, more citrus that reads as clean rather than glamorous. The sovereign still appears, but the appearance is edited, shorter, brighter, and timed to the hour when rooms behave. Letters learn to travel through fire. Incoming packets are aired on lines like laundry. Wax is cracked with tongs. The apothecary wafts a dish of warm vinegar beneath paper as if reading smoke. Messengers wait in liminal rooms where benches face windows, not faces. Behind the scene, the clerk logs provenance with the thoroughness of a customs officer. Diplomacy survives because parchment does not outrun prudence. The night shift turns hallways into hospitals without calling them that are. Torches are replaced by lamps that don't argue with lungs. Buckets are emptied before shame notices. Shoes are wrapped so footfall doesn't wake fear. In one chamber, a brazier barely purrs. In another, a basin listens for fever with its own kind of ear. The rule is simple. Panic is a draft you keep out by closing the right doors. Accountability gets a new ledger. Alongside soap and starch appear columns for recovery. Decline, rest, and comfort. Nodes red like weather. North wing improving. South stairs sulk. Window discipline excellent. The Wood writes, less frankincense, more air, then underlines it because courage is easier to breathe than to burn. The best lines are plain. Thank the laundresses. Keep jokes small. Water boils before opinion. And still, superstition knocks. A charm sits by a bed, not to bribe fate, but to pace a pulse. The chaplain blesses a doorway with the brevity of a man who respects lungs. No one laughs at fear. No one lets fear write the rota. That middle path where belief keeps hands steady and habit keeps feet moving is the palace's quiet genius. Court cleanliness becomes a civic ethic. We protect one another's air. Recovery is staged the way illness was, by increments. First day, a walk to the window, not the corridor. Second, a chair by the sun, not the crowd. Third, a brief audience in a garden where rosemary grows like reminders. Perfume returns last and lightly. Linen drops from double to normal. Music returns from whisper to room tone, and pages go back to being boys instead of birds that carried messages. Afterward, the red seal drawer is repacked with new notes. What worked stays, what didn't becomes a caution printed in blunt ink. The house smells like soap and rain, a combination you'll always trust now. And in those calm pages you see the next necessary chapter. Not crisis, but prevention. Building rooms that breathe better. Planning routes that don't tangle. And writing household ordinances that make tomorrow's panic optional. Shall we read The Long Game of Hygiene? Architecture, ordinances, and the quiet politics of designing a palace that stays clean by habit, not heroics? Start with air, the sovereign no one can crown. Good palaces are wind instruments, high windows that sip sky, low vents that exhale yesterday, stairwells that act like lungs drawing breath through stone. Architects learn the palace's seasons, where summer slams its shoulder, where winter sulks, where kitchens want to bully the chapel. They place courtyards as edits in the sentence of corridors, Pockets where drafts set their manners before re-entering rooms that prefer respect. When a building breathes, people behave. When it doesn't, even silk gets snappish. Materials are policies you can touch. Lime wash is a white sermon against damp, easy to repaint before mildew learns to conjugate. Oak takes polish like a promise and refuses to gossip underfoot. Tile floors near privies admit mistakes and forgive them with water and broom. Tapestries warm walls but earn a quota. So many per gallery, never near a sulky vent, shaken outside on a schedule the sky can't veto. If you've ever chosen paint that hides fingerprints, you understand how stone practices governance. Water needs choreography, not hope. Roofs slope like well-aimed arguments. Gutters feed cisterns lined with clay and common sense. Spill channels keep storms from inventing indoor lakes. Inside, a lattice of service corridors lets buckets travel without staging a parade. In winter, pipes get blankets and prayers. In summer, cistern lids get guards so mosquitoes don't turn a feast into an allegory. Image versus reality gets kinder when gravity has rules. Waste is management's final exam. Garderobes sit on exterior walls, shoot parched smooth trap stones, set where ladder and curiosity both lose interest. Cesspits are lined, mapped, and given anniversaries, pump days that arrive like holidays no one celebrates aloud. Outside the wall, night soil roots are drawn like supply lines. A late cart pays a fine, because lateness is how rumors learn to walk. You don't solve smell, you keep it on a leash. Light is discipline, disguised as grace. North windows give honest daylight for work. Clerestories bless great halls with a high, flattering calm. Shutters are tuned like instruments, so glare doesn't stab tempers. At dusk, oil lamps take over where eyes can still thank them. Wicks trimmed to keep soot from writing memoirs on ceilings. Reflectors placed so faces read, awake rather than interrogated. A throne room that glows evenly makes better decisions. Ordinances turn architecture into habit. Household statutes hang in the steward's office like a soft drumbeat. Windows by the two-finger rule at dawn. Vinegar floors on market days. Incense cones limited to one per nav, unless plague speaks first. The rules assign time to spaces. Laundries owning mid-morning, kitchens owning mid-afternoon, corridors owning the minute after supper. So smells don't collide like rival dukes on a stair. Palace routine reality is mostly calendar. Traffic is designed, not suffered. Servants get service stairs that confess every creak to the right ears. Nobles get broad steps that teach posture. Coal and linen have their opposing rivers and never cross. Doors are numbered, not for math but for dignity. A tired sovereign should never meet a bucket at a corner that could have been predicted. When paths are legible, tempers have less to do. Gardens act as lungs and laundries of the mind. Herb beds near workrooms aren't just pretty, they're practical. Rosemary to reset a kitchen's nose, mint to sweeten sick rooms, thyme to stare down a sulky drain. Gravel walks sequester mud before it meets carpets. Rills murmur past open casements, so rooms remember water without inviting it in. The best courtyards smell like shade with opinions. Budgets are architectural tools. The steward funds coal by the wing, soap by the season, lime by the corridor, with a line item labelled. Apology, that buys linen before penance is required. He invests in chimney sweeps like a bishop invests in parchment, and pays laundresses enough that talent stays married to the cauldrons. Behind the throne, numbers are air, with a ledger, unseen, absolute, kind when disciplined. Training is infrastructure you carry in your bones. New footmen learn the two-pace pause. At doorways, so air can swap politely. Maids memorize how to crack a casement without making tapestries jealous. Valleys learn the climate of each gallery. the one where a glove reads as mercy, and the one where it reads as arrogance. These are building codes for people, repeatable gestures that keep rooms from turning feral. Maintenance is ritual, not aftermath. Monday lime wash, Tuesday hinges, Wednesday drains, Thursday chimneys, Friday inventories. The weeks march like psalms. Small repairs happen while pride looks the other way. Big ones happen before pride has to speak. A palace that fixes itself in whispers never has to shout. That's the secret under most court cleanliness praise. Someone loved a checklist enough to save the afternoon. Finally, mercy built into stone. Benches near windows where hard conversations can borrow air. Alcoves for faint thoughts to sit down before they become fainting bodies. A washstand tucked behind a screen where a minister can rinse courage back onto his face. Architecture can't make people good, but it can make goodness cheaper. And when the day refuses to play fair, the building keeps the temperature of hope. You can feel how this design ethic asks for one more test. When the crown changes heads, does the machine still hum? That means succession, new habits, fresh noses, and the maintenance of myth without breaking the workers who hold it up. If you're ready, we'll step into the season of handovers, accession days, deep cleans, staff briefings, the ceremonial reset where a palace teaches a new body how to live inside its weather. A new reign starts with brooms, before it starts with trumpets. You can hear it in the corridors at dawn. Bristle on stone, linen sighing off railings, the small thunder of ledgers open to clean pages. The dead monarch's scent still lingers, resin, wool, ink, and the building exhales it respectfully while preparing room for another pulse. This is image versus reality with a black border, grief in public, logistics in private, and everyone doing both at once without dropping the porcelain. The first reset is air. Windows learn a new schedule because the new sovereign sleeps later or earlier. Vents get tuned so a different throat won't complain. The chapel shifts in sense by a finger's width from somber to steady. Linen rotations change. More walks mean more shirts. Fewer balls mean less starch. You feel the house adjusting like a great creature, rebalancing weight on its paws. Palace routine reality proves itself here. Systems soothe personal quirks until they become institutional calm. Valets and ladies' maids begin diplomacy with skin. They test scents on the wrist, then behind the ear, listening for how a body answers. Citrus brightens, resin grounds, lavender hushes. Hair gets a new grammar. Perhaps fewer powders, perhaps more oil, perhaps a wig only on hard days. These are tiny edits to ceremonial grooming that announce continuity but breathable. Portrait painters will later pretend this was inevitable. The laundry knows it was negotiated in teaspoons. Wardrobe is politics sewn in thread. Old colours retire with affection. A fresh palette appears that flatters the face and calms the factions. Cooler blues for a mind-first monarch, warmer reds for a spine-first one. Tailors alter symbolism as much as seams. Softer cuffs for a listener, sharper shoulders for a decider. When courtiers murmur that the rain feels different, they're really noticing that silk now breathes at a different tempo. The steward's office becomes air traffic control for civility. Coal is reallocated because the new favourite corridor is drafty. Water hours are shifted because bathing now happens before dawn. Shoe scrapers appear at a different door because the sovereign changed walking routes. He redraws service maps so buckets and dukes never collide. If court cleanliness survives turmoil, it's because the steward can change seasons on paper and the staff can make paper into weather. Physicians audit habits kindly. Does the new ruler run warm? Then cooler rooms for council and lighter broths. At noon, runs cold. Add wool linings to audience chambers and schedule walks when sun behaves. A sovereign who chews cloves before speeches gets clove water ready as policy. One who hates vinegar gets rosemary instead. Health is made legible to the building so the building can reciprocate with decent mornings. The great public rooms rehearse their welcome, like theatres changing shows. The levy line is tightened or loosened to match stamina. Musicians revise the key of the procession fanfare to flatter a new stride. Banners are washed or remade, so colours don't argue with the face at centre stage. Even staircases learn new timing. The sovereign prefers to pause at the second landing, so ushers shift speeches to match the oxygen. Nothing mystical, just choreography that keeps dignity audible. In kitchens, taste writes memoirs. Spices that were indulgent become rare. Vegetables that were garnish become protagonists. Wine is watered a hair more or less depending on how policy likes to walk after supper. The safe broth pot becomes a permanent citizen for the transition month because nerves are lousy at digestion. Cooks and physicians hold quiet summits over ladles, and the realm benefits because meals stop being accidents. The scent map of the palace is redrawn. Offices that once smelled of expensive exhaustion now smell of pencil shavings and resolve. The throne room sheds a drop of incense and gains a breath of pine. Private chambers trade musk for linen or linen for musk, depending on which rumour should win. This is aristocratic upkeep at its most subtle, directing emotion with ounces instead of edicts so the first months don't fray. Etiquette adapts like water. A new bow depth, a new protocol for gloves, a fresh habit for who speaks first on stairs. Servants memorize the sovereign's tells. The way a finger worries a ring when patience thins, the way eyes drift toward windows when the room needs shorter sentences. Their job is to meet fatigue with speed and pride with softness. Behind the throne is simply compassion organized into timing. The archive receives its baptism. Household ordinances are copied with edits in the margins. Windows 2 fingers at dawn, unless the monarch slept poorly. Incense 1 cone except on grief days. Linens double during council weeks. The red seal drawer gets updated too, because outbreaks do not respect accessions. Continuity isn't an accident. It's paperwork that knows when to bow and when to hold the line. Finally, there's a quiet ritual you won't find on a liturgy. At dusk, the chief laundress, the steward, the barber, and the chaplain step into the empty throne room. One places a clean cloth on the armrest. One adjusts a window 2 fingers open. One sets a bowl of rosemary water where breath will pass. One says 5 plain words. Keep this house from rumour. It's not magic. It's a promise. Rooms will be kind, corridors will be honest, and the new body will learn the building's weather without bruising. Next, we'll watch how a reign learns to defend its illusion in public, satire, scandal, leaks, and how the hygiene machine fights back with humour, redundancy, and rooms that refuse to panic. Start where trouble begins. The stairwell whisper. A footman repeats a joke that landed too well. A clerk misreads a ledger and invents a shortage. A visiting poet notices a draft and turns it into a metaphor for decline. Rumour moves like smoke, seeking high ceilings and crowded lungs. The palace has a protocol for that. Open the right window, close the wrong door, and feed the air something better to carry. In other words, manage the environment and you manage the narrative. That's the sober core beneath image versus reality. First responders are not guards, they're schedulers. The steward trims tomorrow's levy, shortens speeches, and adds 1 extra linen change to rooms where tempers build. The kitchen swaps heavy dishes for bright ones. The musicians change the key of the procession by a step so the hall breathes. This isn't spin, it's respiration. When the house inhales calmly, gossip loses altitude. You'd be amazed how often palace routine reality defeats a pamphlet with timing alone. Satire arrives wearing ink-stained gloves. A handbill sketches the sovereign's wig as a beehive. A lampoon sniffs at a rumoured bath habit. Someone rhymes virtue with starch. The interplay is earnest and quiet. Open a laundry courtyard to a visiting guild. Let them watch the boiling, bluing, and beating. Invite a printer's apprentices to see the kitchens between services. Let people smell order. A tour is better than a duel because noses don't argue. When scandal is specific, say a botched perfume at Vespers or a rash the portraitist can't ignore, the answer is choreography, not denial. Move the next audience outdoors. Switch to citrus and rosemary that red is honest. Let a physician be conspicuously seen, rinsing hands in a basin by the door. The point isn't to shout, clean. It's to let cleanliness be witness doing its job. That's court cleanliness as demonstration, not slogan. Pamphleteers love numbers. Give them better ones. Publish the soap ledger and the coal allowance for infirmaries. Copy a page of the accident book with names removed. Post the two-finger window rule where petitioners can see it obeyed. Bureaucracy makes terrible poetry and excellent armour. Satire feeds on secrets. Paper properly shared turns appetite into boredom. Humour is the palace's favourite disinfectant. A consort arrives to supper wearing a pomander the size of an apple, then passes it to the ambassador whose cologne has opinions. Laughter resets the room without naming the offence. A band plays a quick, airing jig, while ushers crack two windows exactly 2 fingers. The joke becomes tradition, and tradition becomes policy with manners. You can call this ceremonial grooming for morale. Control of sightlines matters. A sour corridor is closed for gilding, which is not entirely a lie. Someone does polish the sconces while the lime cures. A staircase notorious for drafts is turned into a portrait gallery. People slow down, air settles and tempers forget their deadlines. Architecture becomes PR by erasing ambushes where smell and rumour used to collaborate. Then there's the friendly leak. The steward accidental leaves a notebook open to a page that lists linen rotations during plague months. A valet lets a visiting magistrate see the vinegar barrels stamped with dates. The barber mentions, within earshot of a pamphleteer, the morning he refused lead powder and the sovereign thanked him. None of this breaks oath. All of it feeds the city a diet of competence. Behind the throne, candour works best when it looks unplanned. When lies grow teeth, the court borrows a courtroom's habits. Witnesses, dates, receipts, laid out briefly, politely, with a bowl of myrtle water on the table. So the room keeps its temper. The sovereign speaks last and shortest. Then something physical happens. Bread distributed at the gate, a hospital brazier replaced, a sewer pit pumped a week early. Gesture plus ledger beats, rumour, plus rhyme, 9 days out of 10. Art fights too. A fresh portrait, accidentally placed where the line forms shows sleeves, less starched, eyes rested, hands steady. A print sent to provinces depicts the queen walking an herb garden with the laundress who saved a festival. Music joins in, a new processional with cleaner harmonies, fewer drums, and a trumpet figure that says, "We breathe together." Myth is resilient when it smells like work. Of course, some seasons overwhelm. In true stink months or grief months, the palace changes the score. Fewer receptions, more garden audiences, incense reduced to a thread, linens double. A short proclamation explains the adjustments without apology. People can forgive anything they can predict. The myth of effortless grace survives because the effort chooses legibility over mystery when it matters. And when the storm passes, the staff audits the autopsy of rumour. Which corridor lied? Which schedule slipped? Which scent read as arrogance instead of hygiene? The Red Seal manual gains a paragraph. A door gains a spring. A steward gains a habit of thanking the person who noticed first. Next we'll step outside the living palace entirely, into museums, restorers' labs, and heritage houses, where visitors sniff old wood and swear they can smell royal, while curators quietly recreate the air. The last, strangest chapter in keeping royal hygiene myths alive long after the hot water went cold. Walk into the period gallery, and your nose meets the curator before your eyes do. The air is cool and a little dry. Cedar vitrines, linen mounts, a whisper of beeswax floor polish. Lights sit high and steady, tempered to flatter silk without bleaching its memories. You think you're seeing a throne room paused in amber, but what you're really seeing is maintenance masquerading as time travel. It's image versus reality with a label. Plexiglass where drafts once roamed, data loggers where servants once listened, and a climate plan where gossip used to do the work. Conservation is housekeeping with Latin. Textiles relax on acid-free supports. Lead-white portraits rest behind glass that filters tantrums from the sun. Wigs perch on carved blocks so curls don't forget their grammar. A gloved hand brushes dust like a prayer, and every touch writes itself into a log. Who? Why? Humidity then. Humidity now. If court linen once turned sweat into virtue, modern mounts turned fragility into legibility. The job hasn't changed. Keep things readable to the living without injuring the dead. Scent is the trickiest ghost. Some houses deploy faint blends. Rose water, suggestion in the bedchamber, a juniper thread in the chapel, orange and clove near the stair to nudge imagination without creating a headache. Others refuse perfume entirely, letting old wood, lime wash and beeswax do the storytelling. Either way, staff are referees. Too much scent and royal hygiene myths feel like air freshener, too little, and visitors miss how rooms once negotiated with noses. The sweet spot is a room that exhales gently and makes you lean closer. Behind the velvet rope, restorers perform triage that would impress a battlefield. Silk shattered by weight gets couching stitches, finer than whispered secrets. Powdered wigs, stiff with centuries of biography, are vacuumed through micro screens. Leather gloves receive a teaspoon of pH, kindness, and a day of quiet. You're watching palace routine, reality reborn, as lab habit, Monday dust, Tuesday threads, Wednesday varnish. So objects can survive not only time, but also our attention. Labels do a better job than gossip ever did. Clean by change sits next to a linen chemise. A louse comb, small as a sentence fragment, lies under glass. A pomander is disassembled into rind, clove, and paste so the nose can read the paragraph. A visitor smiles, realizing that ceremonial grooming was logistics with ribbons. Good exhibits don't sneer at the past, they turn it inside out until the audience recognizes its own bathrooms, laundries, and little evasions. Audio guides are modern valets for the mind. You hear the creak of a ruff, the soft chime of a sistrum in a chapel, the echo of boots on turned stone. Then a voice explains why fireplaces draw better when a window opens 2 fingers. You're not being sold nostalgia, you're being taught airflow. The best stops whisper the unglamorous. Where chamber pots hid why vinegar followed cooks, how a staircase edited smell by altitude. Even in museums, the behind the throne lessons are practical. Ethics gets a room of its own, even if it's only a plaque. Curators admit that portraits flatter, that Mercury made cheeks bright and lives shorter, that fresh sometimes meant briefly disguised. The point isn't to sandblast legend, it's to annotate it. Visitors handle a replica rouge pot, then read about ingredients in the original. If you leave feeling both enchanted and informed, the exhibit shows honesty over theatre without losing either. Reconstruction is where scholarship meets craft. Conservators commission historically plausible starch to stiffen a replica rough and discover that it itches like a grudge. They boil a small batch of herb vinegar and measure how quickly a room forgives onions. Failures get logged with as much love as successes. That humility keeps image versus reality from collapsing into a scold. Instead, you get a chorus of attempts that add up to comprehension. Docents are translators with pulse. They guide you through a morning levee reenactment and quietly note the bucket brigade you don't see. They explain that linen outperformed hot baths for 9 months of the year. They hold a mirror up to a white-laid portrait and say gently, "Pretty can be expensive." Their stories come with textures. The rough seam under a cuff, the cold brass of a basin. And you understand that past people were not fools. They were engineers with fewer tools. The back-of-house tour is the true chapel. Storage racks labelled with quiet authority, rolls of unglamorous muslin, a quarantine shelf where new donations rest until bugs and mould admit defeat. A conservator shows you a microscope image of lace that looks like a galaxy and a flake of powder that looks like a cliff. Suddenly, aristocratic upkeep reads as labour, not sparkle. A basin of distilled water is as heroic as a crown. Digital exhibits add a strange grace note. Infrared reveals underdrawings where a painter first tried a harsher jawline, then softened it for diplomacy. Spectral scans find clove oil in the weave near a cuff. 3-day sound recreates the murmur of a levee. Linen whisper, mint pastil click, a small cough edited by music. Technology doesn't dethrone the myth. It lets you stand where truth and theatre shook hands each morning. And when you step back into daylight, the royal smell fades to car exhaust and coffee. But you carry the method home. Open the window, 2 fingers, while the kettle sings. Keep a lemon for courage and a clean cloth for apologies. The palace taught you to see housekeeping as politics and kindness as infrastructure. Next stop isn't a gallery. It's our opening scene, where we promise the audience that the spotless crown was stitched, starched, and sometimes crawling. If you're ready, we'll cue the intro. If the palace taught us anything, it's this. Clean wasn't a smell, it was a system. 1,000 small mercies. Linen swapped on time, windows opened 2 fingers. Vinegar, where gossip liked to linger, kept power from fogging up its own reflection. The legend sparkled on the surface, but underneath ran gears. Servants with quiet wrists, stewards with stubborn ledgers, physicians who counted breaths, and rooms designed to behave. Strip away the gold, and you find choreography. And honestly, that's more impressive than magic. We followed the illusion from mirror to sewer, from perfumed gloves to Red Seal crisis manuals, and the pattern never changed. Image versus reality is a negotiation, not a lie. Scent, framed nerves. Fabric absorbed yesterday. Architecture taught air to have manners. Even rumour had a hygiene. Humour, timing, and paper. The royal hygiene myths only worked because ordinary people practiced extraordinary consistency when no one was applauding. So take the blueprint home. What's your version of the 2-finger window rule? A tiny habit that keeps chaos from settling in. Which corridor in your day needs a bowl of metaphorical rosemary water? Where could you swap spectacle for sequence? Less grand gesture, more clean by change. And watch your own court. Family, team, self. Breathe easier. Power, it turns out, is just responsibility with good routines. I want to hear your read on it. Which room grabbed you? The dressing tables sent diplomacy, the laundry's thunder, the throne room's air machine, or the Red Seal drawer's calm. What single ritual would you steal tomorrow? Lemon on the wrist, vinegar floors on busy days, linen as the body's plumbing, or the accident book that turns panic into procedure? Which myth cracked for you? And what truth crawled out that felt oddly practical? If this journey gave you goosebumps and good tools, pass it on. Share the episode with someone who loves history that breathes. Someone who'd smile at the idea that a city can be held together by starch, timing, and kindness. Stories become culture when we keep them moving. And, hey, if you want more deep dives that turn polished legend into usable wisdom, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. Leave a comment telling me the one habit you'll try this week and the moment that surprised you most. The next time we crack open the past, You'll be in the front row, window 2 fingers open, lemon at the ready, and a palace's worth of calm in your pocket.